Let's hear it for the sisters, they know how to stomp. Up all night, cook all day. Give it to the brothers, they know how to sing. In the circle all day, up all night. Round dance, chicken scratch, 49 and stomp. Bury my heart at Horseshoe Bend. We pay for light, we pay for water. Next thing you know, we'll pay to breathe harder. Let's hear it for the sisters, they know how to stomp. Text all day, talk all night. Give it to the brothers, they know how to sing. Love all night, pay all day. August Summit, Hisagaramasi, Pomadi, Moe, Tawigas, Pogohoyan, Ye, Giadi, Mon, Agatlechka, Heathlin, Pogalajan, Abia Yothless. Let's hear it for the sisters, they know how to stomp. Dance all night, kids all day. Give it to the brothers, they know how to sing. Work all day, kids all night.
Hello, my name is Jennifer King, and I serve as the director of the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archives and Rare Book Library. And on behalf of the Emory Libraries, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's poetry reading with Joy Harjo, the United States Poet Laureate. We here at Emory have many things to celebrate, and one of those is the prominent place that poetry holds in our hearts and on our campus. Since the fall of 2005, the Raymond Danowski Poetry Library Reading Series has hosted many wonderful poets from America and abroad, including Lucille Clifton, Seamus Heaney, Carol Ann Duffy, Natasha Trethewey, Nikki Giovanni, Tracy K. Smith, and Richard Blanco. This reading series is one of the longest of its kind on our campus. I am grateful today to listen and reflect together with Joy Harjo, whose words ground and connect us. During this time of great instability, we need to lean into the power of this grounding and interconnectivity. Thinking of Harjo's poem, Once the World Was Perfect, the following lines resonate. And now, we had no place to live, since we didn't know how to live with each other. Then, one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket. A spark of kindness made a light. The light made an opening in the darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder. Today, we come together to make a ladder. Introducing Joy Harjo, our two inspiring and esteemed individuals, my colleague and friend, Dr. Mandy Sir-Sitzma, and joining us from San Francisco is the poet Jennifer Forster. Jennifer Elise Forster is the author of Leaving Tulsa, 2013, and Bright Raft in the Afterweather, 2018, both published by the University of Arizona Press. She received her PhD in English and Literary Arts from the University of Denver, her MFA from the Vermont College of the Fine Arts, and is an alum of the Institute of American Indian Arts. Jennifer teaches at the Rainier Writing Workshop. She is also one of 3 volume editors, along with Joy Harjo and Leanne Howe, for the new Norton Anthology of Native Nations Poetry, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through. She also serves as Joy Harjo's literary assistant. Forster is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma. Dr. Mandy Sir-Sitzma is a senior lecturer in the Department of English at Emory University and director of the Emory Writing Center. She is the author of the book Self-Determined Stories, The Indigenous Reinvention of Young Adult Literature. Her scholarship on Indigenous literature and film has appeared in the journals Studies in American Indian Literatures, Wakaza Sa Review, Children's Literature, and Research on Diversity in Youth Literature. Dr. Sir-Sitzma is a member of the Indigenous Student Initiative Committee and has been an integral partner in planning this afternoon's program, bringing together the library, faculty, and students. Before we start this afternoon's program, I want to offer thanks to the Emory Creative Writing Program and the Hightower Fund, as well as my colleagues in the Emory University Libraries, the organizers, planners, curators, archivists, funders, and friends for all they have done to make today's program possible. I also want to thank all of you joining us virtually and spending time with us this afternoon for this celebration of poetry. In addition to acknowledging the many who have come together to create today's program, Dr. Craig S. Womack, Associate Professor, Department of English, Emory College of Arts and Sciences, joins us to center our program in honor of the land we occupy. Dr. Womack is a leading voice in our community, elevating Creek and other Native voices, experiences, ideas, and concerns. He is the author of Red on Red, Native American Literary Separatism and Drowning in Fire, and co-director of the 2018 documentary, Hearing the Call, The Cultural and Spiritual Journey of Rosemary McCombs Maxey. Later this month, Dr. Womack will be moderating a panel, Freedom Claims in Relation to McGirt versus Oklahoma, about the landmark McGirt decision on March 30th at the Carlos Museum. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Craig Womack, who will be followed by Jennifer Forster and Mandy Sur-Sitzma's introduction to poet laureate Joy Harjo.
Here at Emory, we're trying not to do land acknowledgements that are just a single sentence. So I'm going to attempt to say what I think needs to be said and also be aware of people's time, which after all is one of our most precious commodities. We're very excited to have a poet of this stature, Joy Harjo, join us here in the homelands of Muskogee Creek people, and the place where, in fact, her own relatives originally hail from. And where I come from, when we start something important, we often begin by fasting or praying or singing. And I don't know about all y'all out there in your different time zones, but I've already blown the fasting part. So I'm going to go to praying and singing. And the song addresses both of these issues. The words say that we're to begin our prayers early in the morning. And even though during the day we might grow tired or weary, or to use the language of the song, we might become bothered, we're to sustain those prayers up until the evening. And I don't know about you all, but for me, and I think many people doing the work of social justice right now, we're pretty tired. And we're beginning to wonder if this kind of work is even possible at this point in history. But the song tells us we got to keep going. And this poet is a case in point. Her career now is in its 4th decade. And I know for a fact there have been times when she's been weary and discouraged and tired like all the rest of us, but she's continued forward with this important work. So here's the song. Hat Hayaganale Jijet Miko Sabi Mongen Hoyaka please. Hat Hayaganale Jijet Miko Sabi Mongen Hoyaka please. Miko sabe cheodoses chena otles poyaka please. Hat hayagena legijet Miko sabe mongen poyaka please. Emory University is founded on lands that were opened up due to a treaty signed with the Creek Nation in 1821 that opened up lands that are both the location of where the original campus was founded near Covington, Georgia, the campus that would become Oxford University, as well as Emory University here in Atlanta, where this program originates from. After this treaty with Creek people was signed in 1821, this allowed in the following year in 1822 DeKalb County to be incorporated and established. So what I'm hoping that you'll understand is that there's a direct lineage between Creek Treaty lands and the current location of Emory University, Oxford University, as well as the original places where they were located. In 1836, Muskogee Creek people were forcibly removed from their remaining lands in Alabama, removed by federal troops. And this was the same year, of course, that Emory University was founded. Creek people were marched to Indian Territory, which is now the present day state of Oklahoma. My own relatives are from just to the south of where this program originates from Morgan County. Muskogee Creek people continue to be involved in these lands in the Southeast, in Georgia and Alabama, in all kinds of different ways, including co-managing sacred sites and jurisdictional agreements with other tribal governments through the Southeast and in many other ways. So I'm asking you today to consider the historical fact that Emory University is located on Creek Treaty lands. The final thing I would like to ask you to think about is the reality and the fact that Emory is located in the city of Atlanta. Yet when we look around our classrooms, in spite of teaching people from all around the globe, people of every race and every ethnicity, there's two demographics that are shockingly missing from our classroom. And one is certainly Native American students. The other group that I want to address relates to our location here in Atlanta. Look around your classes and see if you can find a person in your class from Atlanta. See if you can find a person of color in your class from Atlanta. See if you can find an African-American person in your class from Atlanta. And if it's hard enough to find a person from Atlanta in your classes, try to find a person in your classes from these Atlanta neighborhoods: Cary Park, Grove Park, Center Hill, Bankhead, Washington Park, Mosley Park, Hunter Hills, English Avenue, Vine City. I did an informal survey in my class just a couple days ago. I did this several times to get the best count that I could. And I asked people in my classes how many of them were from Atlanta. Out of the 43 students I teach, one person was from Atlanta. Let me say that again, one person out of 43. She's not a minority student. This is a situation that simply cannot continue. If we meet a person on our campus who's from Atlanta, who's African-American or minority person, this person probably works in food service, on the ground staff, perhaps works as administrative staff for one of our departments. Right now, Emory has a task force that was recently put together that's looking at our vexed history in relationship to Jim Crow and slavery. It's comprised of many fine people doing laudable work. I'm on that task force. And yet, if we look at our vexed history in relationship to slavery, while continuing to practice it, that task force is going to be rendered ineffective. Emory is in desperate need of a bridge program that allows people from neighborhoods in Atlanta where no one has ever gone to Emory to be able to have slots here, to come here, to be prepared to succeed on this campus. This is not a quixotic dream. There's other places that are doing this, many models to learn from. And in fact, just days ago, there was an article in the New York Times about just such a bridge program that has been established at Harvard. So please don't take my word for any of this. Do your own land acknowledgement. If you're teaching a class or in a class, look around your classroom. Try to find somebody from Atlanta. Try to find a person of color from Atlanta. Try to find an African-American student from Atlanta in your class. And if I'm wrong about all this, please let me know. But if you find the results that I have for many, many years, ask yourself, what are you going to do about this land acknowledgement in order to rectify this situation? So I've tried to explain a little bit about what land means to me. Land is a living entity who reminds us of our own ongoing responsibilities. And the reason why Emory University is so lost right now is because we have no idea where we're at. We don't know where we're located. We don't know where we're at in relationship to Creek lands, and we don't even know that we're in the city of Atlanta. So if you would like to learn more about Creek lands in relationship to Emory University, one of our professors, Deb Vidali, has put together a land acknowledgement that's very well researched and crafted and vetted and can fit into any number of contexts as an educational tool. So please contact us and we'll direct you towards that statement. Mado, thank you for your kind attention.
He's Jay, Jennifer Forrester, Chahujifgados, Umalegida Ojax, Monomezen Echaswalgi Echusti Omas, Lojibogadari Umadalwados, San Francisco Legedos. On the day of Joy Harjo's inauguration in Washington, D.C. as the U.S. Poet Laureate, the first Native American to be given that honor and position, Joy had brought her family, friends, students, and teachers with her to share in that moment. She brought along her own influences and mentors, too. Audre Lorde, Leslie Silko, Pablo Neruda, and the Muskogee poets, Alexander Posey and Louis Littlecoon Oliver. Indeed, Joy brought all Muskogee people to that moment, all Native people, all people. When the lights rose on the stage that evening, the first words we would hear would be Muskogee words, as Ahilis Haya and our principal chief opened the event with prayers and acknowledgments. I teared up, knowing that there were more than a few of us in the audience who understood what was being said, and knowing that those words would carry all the way home, which is the direction Joy's poetry always travels. Joy also brought something more to American poetry that night. She brought jazz. She brought a band. She brought a crystallization of her poetics. Her poems melded with song and chant and humor, backed by instrumental riffs, as she stood off center stage talking with the audience, holding at once a book, a saxophone, a flute, and several taped together pages. Joy's life as a poet is a life of collaboration, community, and art. She writes poetry, yes, and memoir and children's books, but she also writes and performs plays, screenplays, and musicals. She released her 7th album of music, I Pray for My Enemies, just this month. The range and enthusiasm with which Joy engages her creativity is part of what shapes her particular genius. It is also a quality of living that I think we can all learn from, to live in abundant creativity, to approach all acts of making with gratitude. I'm honored to help introduce Joy Harjo because she has been a great teacher to me, but also because she is a guide and inspiration to countless others. As her literary assistant, I receive floods of emails daily from people of all walks of life, all corners of the world. A retired firefighter in Alabama who never read poetry until he came across one of her poems. An exiled and persecuted artist from Indonesia who finds solace in Joy's words. I've worked with Joy and witnessed her intense dedication to the youth and arts of our Muskogee communities, and her steadfast commitment to giving back to and creating with and for Native people of all nations. Her signature project as U.S. Poet Laureate is a digital interactive story map, Living Nations, Living Words, highlighting the works of 47 Native Nations poets. Along with the recently released anthology, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, Joy seeks to show, through poetry, that Native people and poets have vital and unequivocal roots in this country. Harjo's work aspires to healing and reconciliation, to help us all and our fraught and diverse histories understand each other. Whether she is bringing to light the too long suppressed history of Muskogee and Southeastern peoples, as she does in American Sunrise, or is bravely confronting her personal story, as she does in her first memoir, Crazy Brave, in a way that empowers her readers towards their own healing. Joy's writings and music always reach out to our hearts, to encourage us all to be better human beings. I was so honored when asked to open Joy's reading with one of my own poems, and felt it appropriate to read the poem included in the Living Nations Living Words project. This is a poem that emerged from reading William Bartram's travel journals through the Southeast and Florida, as I was looking for my own sense of homeland in other people's maps of places I know only in story. From the Maybe Bird. I find you nowhere that is here or there. Below the sunken Uchi path, iron ore. The ridge dividing water, veined with it. Pea vine, wiregrass, shortleaf hickory. Old fields, flood plains, indigo dyed. When the woods were still dense, saw palmetto. Grapes of the hills destroyed by fire, and the haw chestnut by the hatchet. If it were easy to leave our bodies in the fork of Red River, 2 mounds of earth. If it were easy to leave you behind, in a stream clear with flowering stones, to find you in the language where I lost you, as if you were a sentence in this poem, and this poem an archive of the forest. But I have burned the remaining pine. On the bluffs, strawberries thinly scattered, and in the old beaver ponds, briar root, a bread made of it for times of famine. Thank you, Mado.
Thank you for that moving poem, Dr. Forrester. My Emory undergraduate students and I have had a rich journey this semester as I teach Joy Harjo's writing alongside your poems and Professor Womack's scholarship. Thank you both for opening this event by sharing from your experiences as Muskogee Creek writers who share Harjo's special relationship to the land on which we are hosting this reading. Dr. Womack, your extensive scholarship on Muskogee Creek literature and history deeply informs the way I read and teach Harjo's work. I am deeply honored to introduce Joy Harjo to read today for Emory's Raymond Danowski Poetry Library series. Joy Harjo is an internationally renowned musician and writer, a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation belonging to Hickory Ground. She became the 23rd Poet Laureate of the United States in 2019 and was appointed to a rare 3rd term this past fall. Harjo is the author of 9 books of poetry, including She Had Some Horses, In Mad Love and War, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, How We Became Human, and An American Sunrise. She co-edited a groundbreaking 1997 anthology of Native women's writing and is executive editor of the beautiful new Norton Anthology of Native Nations Poetry, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through. Harjo has 6 award-winning albums of original music. Her new album, I Pray for My Enemies, is out this month. Her titles for children include The Good Luck Cat and For a Girl Becoming. Harjo's first memoir, Crazy Brave, won several awards, including an American Book Award. Her second memoir, Poet Warrior, is forthcoming with Norton in the fall. Harjo's numerous honors and awards include the Ruth Lilly Prize for Lifetime Achievement from the Poetry Foundation, the Wallace Stevens Award from the Academy of American Poets, the William Carlos Williams Award from the Poetry Society of America, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. Harjo has taught at numerous institutions, most recently the University of Tennessee. She is a chancellor of the American Academy of Poets, holds a Tulsa Artists Fellowship, and chairs the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. More than any of her previous works, Harjo's 2019 collection, An American Sunrise, is immersed in this Southeast space. I returned to see what I would find, she writes. In these lands we were forced to leave behind. How meaningful it has been to read An American Sunrise this winter with the grass of the Emory Quad under my feet. How enlightening to discuss these poems with my students, marveling together at Harjo's brilliant craft while joining her in peeling back the layers of our American landscapes. And how significant for Emory to be hosting Joy Harjo here today, even through these mediated layers of technology. Thanks to Dr. Womack, I have heard a few Muskogee voices on this campus before. Jennifer Forrester, and also Rosemary McCombs-Maxey, Sterling Harjo, Marcus Briggs-Cloud, and Sarah Deer among them. How wonderful to see Harjo's voice added to this rich chorus. For despite all attempts to erase them, the Muskogee people endure. Today, the Muskogee Creek Nation in Oklahoma is the fourth largest tribal nation in the US, with more than 80,000 citizens. Another 3,000 citizens belong to the Porch Creek Indians tribal nation in Alabama. Harjo's early poem, Anchorage, ends, "Who would believe the fantastic and terrible story of all of our survival, those who were never meant to survive?" A survivor of genocide, Harjo sings poems that spiral us back and forth through time, helping us see and celebrate Indigenous as well as Black resilience. Emory can learn a lot from Joy Harjo as we reckon with the history and enduring consequences of what has happened on this land, and as we seek to be better relatives who take meaningful reparative actions. A through line I see in Harjo's decades of poetry, prose, and music is the call to seek healing, embrace beauty, and give thanks, even and especially as we face the demons of our histories and present realities. I shared one of Harjo's first poems, I Give You Back, with Emory English major graduates last May. I release you, my beautiful and terrible fear. I release you. Nourishing words in a time when we are all so full of fear and so in need of healing. Harjo's recent poem, Honoring from an American Sunrise, finishes with an invitation. Let's honor the maker. Let's honor what's made. Join me in honoring the lands you're on, the gifts of those lands, and the people who've cared for and are caring for those lands. Join me in honoring poetry and poets. Join me in welcoming Joy Harjo.
Hinjay Stongo, I'm really happy to be here with you at Emory. And in this performance tonight, I want to start with the South. Certainly, there's a lot of Muskogee Creek history there. And one part of my family comes directly from just south of there, the Oakmulgee Mounds and that whole area. I have a great grandmother. My great grandmother, Katie Menahui, is the granddaughter of Menahui, who fought Andrew Jackson in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, and her mother was from that area, from the Columbus, Georgia area. And so I have an uncle, a great uncle, Patty Carr. His brother was Thomas Carr, and that's my ancestor. Well, Patty Carr owned the largest horse racing track on the eastern seaboard. So you can imagine that he had a lot of influence and money. So when the Andrew Jackson came through and decided that the lands in the South were incredible, and set all of us Southeastern natives on this trail of tears. Many people have this idea that we were like lurking out in the woods with no culture, with no culture, with no written culture, but that just wasn't so. And so he was moved. Everyone, no matter, we were all moved. And I took a job at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, one, because they're wonderful people, and two, my husband and I got to go back to the homeland area. The Tennessee River is a major roadway, and our peoples traveled up and down that river. So we went all over that place, and I kept remembering, I remember years ago, I would talk to the old people and they'd say, well, you shouldn't go back there. And I realized after being there is the reason they said that is because it's so painful
to go back, and you don't see your people there. And it's as if we've been wiped out of history. It's as if we didn't exist, or if we do exist, it's under some kind of false construct. And I'm going to start with this poem called Exile of Memory, because our memories are very alive and our stories are still there in that place. Do not return. We were warned by one who knows things. You will only upset the dead. They will emerge from the spiral of little houses lined up in the furrows of marrow and walk the land. There will be no place in memory for what they see, the highways, the houses, the stores of interlopers perched over the blood fields where the dead last stood. And then what? You with your words in the enemy's language, do you know how to make a peaceful road through human memory? And what of angry ghosts of history? Then what? Don't look back. In Sunday school, we were told Lot's wife looked back and turned to salt, but her family wasn't leaving paradise. We loved our trees and waters and the creatures and earths and skies in that beloved place. Those beings were our companions, even as they fed us, cared for us. If I turn to salt, it will be of petrified tears from the footsteps of my relatives as they walked west. I did not know what I would find. The first night we set up our bed in the empty room of our condo above the Tennessee River. They'd heard we were coming, those who continued to keep the land, despite the imposition of newcomers and the forced exile of our relatives. All night, they welcomed us. All night, the stomp dancers. All night, the shell shakers. All night, circle after circle made a spiral to the Milky Way. We are still in mourning. The children were stolen from these beloved lands by the government. Their hair was cut, their toys and handmade clothes ripped from them. They were bathed in pesticides, and now clean, given prayers in a foreign language to recite as they were lined up to sleep alone in their army-issued cages. Grief is killing us, anger tormenting us, sadness eating us with disease. Our young women are stolen, raped, and murdered. Our young men are killed by the police or killing themselves and each other. This is a warning. Heroin is a full companion offering freedom from the gauntlet of history. Meth speeds you past it. Alcohol, elixir of false bravado, will take you over the edge of it. Enough chemicals and processed craving, and you can't push away from the table. If we pay enough, maybe we can buy ourselves back. We used to crowd the bar for Tuesday night's 10-cent beer night. It was the Indian poetry, biker, and student bar in that university and military-based town. Trays packed with small cups of beer passed nonstop over the counter all night. We brought all of our thirsty dreams there, gambled with them at the pool table all night, danced with them and each other on the blood-stained dance floor to jukebox songs fed by dimes and quarters all night. And by 2 a.m. we staggered out to the world made by Puritan dreaming. No place for Indians, poets, or any others who would risk the wild winds for dangerous knowledge all night. In the complex here, there is a singing tree. It sings of the history of the trees here. It sings of Manawi, who stood with his warrior friends on the overlook staring into the new town erected by illegal residents. It sings of the Civil War camp, the bloodied, the self-righteous, and the forsaken. It sings of atomic power and the rise of banks whose spires mark the worship places. The final verse is always the trees. They will remain. When it is time to leave this place of return, what will I say I found here? From out of the mist, a form wrestled to come forth. It was many-legged, of many arms, and sent forth thoughts of many colors. There were deer standing near us under the parted, misted sky. As we watched, they smelled for water. Green light entered their bodies from all leaved things they ate. The old Muskogee laws outlawed the Christian religion because it divided the people. We, who are relatives of panther, raccoon, deer, and the other animals and winds, were soon divided. But Muskogee ways are to make relatives. We made a relative of Jesus, gave him a Muskogee name. We could not see our ancestors as we climbed up to the edge of the destruction, but from the dark we felt their soft presences at the edge of our mind, and we heard their singing. There is no word in this trade language, no words with enough power to hold all that we have become. We are in time. There is no time and time. We are in a traditional village far back in town, Ikanajaga. Mother Earth is in labor so long in time. The keeper of birthing is tracking her energy in time. My thinking is questioning how this time. A young boy wrestles with two puppies at the doorway. A little girl bearing an old woman's spirit appears with green plants in her hands. Twins play around the edge of the bed. Earth's womb tightens with the need to push. That's all I can see because of the fogginess of time. I sing my leaving song. I sing it to the guardian trees, this beloved earth, to those who stay here to care for memory. I will sing it until the day I die. There was a singing tree up there at that where I was living on that bluff that overlooked Knoxville. And it was the same bluff my grandfather Manahui stood on with his warriors as they looked down over that then very small town to see where the best horses were that they could steal. But it wasn't stealing because those were still Muskogee lands. This is called Speaking Tree. And it starts with a quote by my friend Sandra Cisneros. We went to graduate school together at the University of Iowa, and we've remained friends ever since. I had a beautiful dream. I was dancing with a tree. That's Sandra. That's very much Sandra. Some things on this earth are unspeakable. Genealogy of the broken. A shy wind threading leaves after a massacre, or the smell of coffee and no one there. Some humans say trees are not sentient beings, but they do not understand poetry, nor can they hear the singing of trees when they are fed by wind or water music, or hear their cries of anguish when they are broken and bereft. Now, I am a woman longing to be a tree planted in a moist, dark earth between sunrise and sunset. I cannot walk through all realms. I carry a yearning I cannot bear alone in the dark. What shall I do with all this heartache? The deepest rooted dream of a tree is to walk even just a little ways from the place next to the doorway to the edge of the river of life and drink. I have heard trees talking long after the sun has gone down. Imagine what it would be like to dance close together in this land of water and knowledge, to drink deep what is undrinkable. So every poem has ancestors. And when I play saxophone, when I improv on sax, often pieces, and it's like referencing of other songs wind through. I often reference Coltrane's A Love Supreme, A Love Supreme. And here, there's June Jordan is in here. I'm referencing June Jordan, the poet June Jordan, with the title of her book, which was one of my favorite books of poetry of hers, Things That I Do in the Dark. So this next one is called No. I think in my work, I've come to see I deal a lot with oppositions. And we're certainly in an oppositional time. We're also holding contradictions because we humans, we're made of contradictions. Some of us more than others. I battle a lot of internal contradictions, and I think that maybe that's one reason I write poetry. This is called, because a poem can hold contradictions. I don't know that poems answer any questions. They are just part of continuing to ask them in a way that the reason for the questioning becomes more enlightened, so to speak. No. Yes, that was me. You saw shaking with bravery, where the government issued rifle on my back. I'm sorry. I could not greet you as you deserved, my relative. They were not my tears. I have a reservoir inside. They will be cried by my sons, my daughters, if I can't learn how to turn tears to stone. Yes, that was me standing in the back door of the house in the alley with fresh corn and bread for the neighbors. I did not see the flood of blood, how they would forget our friendship, would return to kill the babies and me. Yes, that was me whirling on the dance floor. We made such a racket with all that joy. I loved the whole world in that silly music. I did not realize the terrible dance and the staccato of bullets. Yes, I smelled the burning grease of corpses, and like a fool, I expected our words might rise up and jam the artillery in the hands of dictators. We had to keep going. We sang our grief to clean the air of turbulent spirits. Yes, I did see the terrible black clouds as I cooked dinner, and the messages of the dying spelled there in the ashy sunset, everyone addressed Mother. There was nothing about it in the news. Everything was the same. Unemployment was up, another queen crowned with flowers, and then there were the sports scores. Yes, the distance was great between your country and mine, yet our children played in the path between our houses. No, we had no quarrel with each other. I'm going to read a new poem. It's called Somewhere. And I'm going to pull it up here. I was asked to for World Literature Today to write a poem to, right now is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Now, I grew up in Tulsa and I never heard about it. Most of us didn't, but nor did we hear about any Native history. There was an Oklahoma State, I think, thing we had to do, and Natives were mentioned for about 5 minutes, and then it moved on from there. So much of the true history has been silenced for a kind of storyline that a colonialistic storyline. But Tulsa was the site of one of the richest Black communities. It was called the Black Wall Street. It was just over here, a couple of blocks. Well, I'm sure somebody got jealous and where they were sick. Racism is a sickness. They were sick with racism, and they called their friends and killed people and burned the town down, burned it down to the ground. And it's 100 years ago. And what do you say? It's like, how do you approach? Some things are hard. They're difficult to approach, period. I mean, and when you're writing a poem, you have to approach them. You write a poem, you have to be open and you have to be there. That's the hard part of writing the poem sometimes, because you're standing naked with truth. You have to do that when you write poetry. And to stand naked in the truth of those kinds of racial hatred, any kind of hatred, but racial hatred in this instance, I thought, where in the world, how do I write a poem about this? Do I even want to write a poem about this? Because I'm a romantic, and essentially a romantic, and I like to kind of transform. And I have a poem early poem, which I try to turn hatred into love. But it's important, we're all witnesses. And poetry is one way of witnessing, and for me, it's a way of trying to heal. So I was thinking about this, and then I'm walking down the street from my studio, which is right over in the Black Wall Street, right over there, and which is also the border of the Creek Nation, the Osage and Cherokee Nation, all of that coming together in one place. And then I heard a woman call me, come here, come here. And I had seen her. I thought, I'm going to try. There's a lot of homelessness and a lot of street people in the area. And it was a woman's voice. And then I see shoes flying and papers. And then I go look over, and then she calls to me, and I was stunned. I mean, she looked like a goddess, like an African American goddess, an African goddess. And there she was, half naked. And she asked me if I had a sleeping bag. And then when I didn't, of course, and then I left, and then I got back, and I thought, no, I got to go back. I need to give her something. And I went back, and she was like an apparition. She was gone. So this is the poem, Somewhere. It was the day of brutal winds, all of them ganging up to blow injustice down. They sang the changing weather. I was going nowhere. Anything on the ground not burdened by gravity was twisted and lifted up to drop. There were dreams, cities, and plastic bags. I was going nowhere. I tightened my coat to the approaching winter, but you cannot duel and win against a season, history, or a murder of winds. Shooting down MLK Boulevard, I was approaching Archer, the juncture of several histories. A burned street of wishes was smoking there. I was going nowhere. I just wanted to get home, but where is home? I always ask the sky, no matter where I roam. An old Muskogee map is different. We know by trees, rocks, and the obligations of relatives. We might be going nowhere. Our roads aren't nice lines with numbers. They wind like bloodlines through gossip and stories of the holy and the winds. History is everywhere. 3 tribal nations met here. We weren't going to go anywhere. At the corner of justice and fight, the thought of the miraculous was miles from my mind. It was nowhere in my mind. It was curled up in a distant field in the heart of a once loved country. Then I saw books flying from an unseen woman's hands, shoes that never fit her or anyone, and poetry everywhere. She was going nowhere. I had been thinking of the massacre down the street from here, how ghosts keep their place among us, how I might be a ghost set loose here in the wind, walking with a ghost of fire. And then there she stood, a ruined goddess, half naked on the sidewalk, classic Africa in her stance of beauty. We were going nowhere. Excuse me, she called out to me. There is no excuse for this raw story of abuse, and no clothes will fit this moment of the tale. Nothing good enough for her beauty. She was a child when the first man took her. Her home is her pain, naked without clothes. Where was her father, her mother? Burning. There is nowhere. Time is always moving. It is we blood carriers who stay rooted to the gravity of hurt. The story has to be told to be free, like a wind lifted in a breeze. If we don't tell it, the stillness will. I could give her my jeans, my jacket, my shoes. I searched her mind as it flew in the wind. My mind chased her mind through tunnels of time. It was going nowhere. There is no excuse, sang the winds of forgotten history as they covered her up with a ragged blanket stitched with loneliness to take her within. I was feeling my pockets for change, for guns to protect her, nails and lumber to rebuild all the houses burned by hatred. I only found a pen without paper. History goes nowhere. It is always female power that bears truth to righteousness of any new nation. Liberty guards the harbor, Sacagawea, the river of discovery, the Virgin de Guadalupe, the earth. And here, the one for whom I have no name is not nameless. The mass grave is a grave of names. Without knowing them, we are going nowhere. I see her now in every corner, the miracle the winds brought. a song made by the rejects of history wearing clothes that cover nothing. She is everywhere. I turn up the music. It's from my girlhood just miles up the road. Blood tales run through our bones like these streets made of the unspeakable. These winds will never stop telling the truth. I thought I was going nowhere. This next piece I'm going to play, I have a new album out actually just now called I Pray for My Enemies. I'm going to play this song, and it started out as a poem some time back, and it's morphed into this, and it's from an album called, a brand new album called This Morning I Pray for My Enemies. It's called I Pray for My Enemies, and I play sax on this song, and I have a wonderful group of musicians and singers. This morning I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing, even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend.
This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy?
This next poem opens up an American sunrise. It's called an ars poetica form, or it's not really a form. It's a kind of poem to talk about how to write a poem or writing a poetry. And I guess it's what I demand of a poem or writing a song or anything. I can't do what's been done before. And I have to go someplace I've never been, because I'm always, probably like any poet, searching for some kind of fresh or renewal or fresh understanding, even if you wander into dangerous territory. So it's called Break My Heart. There are always flowers, love cries, or blood. Someone is always leaving by exile, death, or heartbreak. The heart is a fist. It pockets prayer or holds rage. It's a timekeeper, music maker, or backstreet truth teller. Baby, 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 you can't say what's been said before, though even words are creatures of habit. You cannot force poetry with a ruler or jail it at a desk. Mystery is blind, but wills you to untie the cloth in eternity. Police with their guns cannot enter here to move us off our lands. History will always find you and wrap you in its 1,000 arms. Someone will lift from the earth without wings, another will fall from the sky through the knots of a tree. Chaos is primordial, all words have roots here. You will never sleep again, though you will never stop dreaming. The end can only follow the beginning, and it will zigzag through time, governments, and lovers. Be who you are, even if it kills you, and it will, over and over again, even as you live. Break my heart, why don't you? I'm going to read a few more poems. Let's see, this one is, I helped edit a anthology, a Norton anthology, kind of a historical Norton anthology called When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, a Norton anthology of native poetry. And our circle of advisors, of experts, were all native poets. And I love that. I don't know that that's been done. But, and it starts with time immemorial all the way up to the present. But one of the poems I always land on, and it's from a Seminole writer, Southeast. And a lot of our people, when all the destruction and the removal and all that happened, went down into the South and became Seminoles. Some of them became Seminoles. The Miccosukee were down there. And so we're headed back towards the South. And I'm going to read this poem, Simplicity. And I love the space this poem creates. The reason I like it, because I like to go there and sit there in the Everglades. It's one of my favorite places, is to go sit with all of those birds and those plants and the waters and listen. So this poem makes it a place like that for me and the reader, not just me, I think for the reader. By Moses Jumper Jr. Simplicity. The small tunnel which the rabbit uses for escape and travel. The small imprints of killdeer in the soft white sand near the pond. The fragileness of the newborn doves and how the mother puts on an act to lure away approaching enemies. The unity of the small minnows as they protect themselves by staying near the shoreline of the stream. The clear whistling sound the scorpion makes to let one know he's near. The shagginess of the owl's nest and the near neatness of the hummingbirds. The long graceful jumps of the sleek green frog, the short choppy hops of the lumpy toad. The agileness and grace of the otter, the awkward wing flapping of the crane, the camouflage nest of the mobile alligator, and the will to reach the water of her young. The winding tunnels that lead to nowhere of the sly red fox. The abundance of life in the wet season and stench of death in the dry. The persistence of the mother hawk to nudge her young to make that flight. I saw all these things and many more, and I know they were right. Thank you, Moses, for that one. Let's see. I think I will close with this one called An American Sunrise. And again, thank you so much for inviting me, and I wish it were in person. I love to come there. It's been a long time. And everyone take care. Be good to yourself in these times and in all times, and be kind to yourself and to others. This is based on a form that the poet Terrence Hayes invented called the golden shovel. And if you listen closely, the end word of every line comes from a line of Gwendolyn Brooks' poetry. So I'll end here. Thank you. An American Sunrise. We were running out of breath. As we ran to meet ourselves, we were surfacing the edge of our ancestors' fights and ready to strike. It was difficult to lose days in the Indian bar if you were straight. Easy if you played pool and drank to remember to forget. We made plans to be professional, and some of us could sing. When we drove to the edge of the mountains with a drum, we made sense of our beautiful, crazed lives under the starry stars. Sin was invented by the Christians, as was the devil, we sang. We were the heathens, but needed to be saved from them. Thin chance. We knew we were all related in this story. A little gin will clarify the dark and make us all feel like dancing. We had something to do with the origin story of blues and jazz. I argued with the music as I filled the jukebox with dimes in June. 40 years later, and we still want justice. We are still America. We. Mado, thank you.
Thank you to Joy Harjo for that beautiful reading, to Mandy and to Jennifer for your uplifting introduction, and to Craig for centering our program. And thanks to each of you for gathering today, connecting as a community, and acknowledging the important and active role our Native American colleagues, writers, and friends play in our lives every day, and together building a ladder to the light. This afternoon's reading will remain available on YouTube. In addition, we have a number of upcoming Rose Library events. On April 7th, we are hosting an NEH Poetics Fellows Lecture. On April 13th, a Rose Library Bound with History event. And the final event in the 2020-2021 Raymond Danowski Poetry Library Reading Series is a special multimedia poetry reading featuring Douglas Kearney in collaboration with video artist Laura Iancu. It's live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Tax Day, Thursday, April 15th. Please go to our website at libraries.emory.edu to learn about all of our events and exhibits. We also have a Rose Library podcast with recent episodes that include a community conversation with Sylvia Plath scholar Heather Clark and with poet Nikki Giovanni. We hope you will join us for future programming, and in the meantime, thank you all for joining us today.
This old creek town appears empty, except for the trees, and the story of how wind will come to clean the earth, of the takers who took and will never give back. One day my grandfather used to sing, a fresh world will rise up to take the place of the society didn't love the earth. We lost ourselves when we crossed that river. My grandfather used to say he would smoke to the east, northwest, and south, touch the earth and the sky. He'd be standing in the kitchen, there'd be no one listening. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. It's the only thing with a give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes. Grandfather flew like smoke to the sky side of earth. He left us here in this place he blessed. What stories he carried, what laughter wrapped memory. And
Now I'm standing in the kitchen and I can hear him singing. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. It's the only thing with a give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes. That love's a bridge that will cross the river home. He'd be standing in the dark with no one listening. How time blows steadily through the trees. How time blows steadily through the city.